So yesterday we spent a little bit of time learning about what built up to the Louisiana Purchase, the reasons why we were even to make the Louisiana Purchase to begin with. So we're going to kind of quickly go through that because I know some people did not spend enough time on the slides yesterday. You might want to go back and actually do that as well today so that you have a little bit of better understanding of what's actually going on. So here's what's happening with the buildup. It was an explorer, Rene Robert Cavalier, who quote-unquote discovered New Orleans. Well, I mean, we know that there were indigenous people there, the Native Americans already, but as far as the French goes, it was the first time the French had discovered it. Let's just put it that way. And he claimed it for France in 1862. It was founded by Jean-Baptiste Le Moynier in 1718. So here it is. The French have this incredibly powerful port at the mouth of the Mississippi River there, which runs pretty much through the middle of the United States. And it gives them access to tons of materials as well as a place to receive goods and have those move throughout the middle of the United States and ship out all of the goods from the middle of the United States. So we're talking maybe even one of the most, if not the most powerful port in the entire world at the time, with all of the natural resources that were located in the United States. And again, you can kind of see here how it runs up through the middle of the United States, on up in there to the Great Lakes area in Minnesota. So, I mean, you could get tons of resources and materials to and from. You could move people, you could move goods, and you could do some trading. It was an extremely powerful place to own at the time. Now, the French and Indian War is going on, and France, I guess, they're kind of getting the idea of, hey, we're about to lose this, and I feel like if we lose this, the concessions are going to be, since a lot of this war was over the land that they were disputing as we moved a little bit further west from the 13 colonies. If we lose this, I think England's going to end up taking this land from us. So we're going to do something a little sneaky here because we realize how important this port is. We're going to actually give that area to Spain with the understanding that we're about to lose all of our land, but if we can keep that and Spain knows that we gave it to them, they'll probably let us use it and we can still kind of do our thing with the port there, which is kind of sneaky of the French. But Spain now has control of the port. And because Spain really wasn't doing a lot as far as like being a superpower in the world at the time, they didn't do a whole lot with the port. They kind of missed an opportunity to exploit all of the riches that were available and all of the shipping and all of the trading that could have gone down there. And so for some weird reason, Spain decided they want to align with France. Well, that kind of alarmed the English. And so they used their super powerful navy to keep Spain away from the Americas. And while they were being away from the Americas, Spain thought, oh dear, here we already have this place down there and we're not even able to get to it. So let's just give it back to France because they're able to travel back and forth. And so they gave the land back to France. And so the time came about where Thomas Jefferson, who was the president of the United States at the time, had a chance to purchase and essentially double the size of the country. And he thought, that sounds like a great idea. People are starting to move out west. And as we move out west, we know that we're gaining more and more resources. And as a new country, the more resources we have, the more money we have, the more money we have, the more power we can have. And we can use those resources to build our nation up to be even stronger, which is kind of important. So he sent some people over to France to try and buy the land from Napoleon. Well, at first Napoleon said, no, we're not going to do that. But then Napoleon realized, I'm having some troubles all over the place, so I need the money, and I desperately need the money. And it was almost like pawn shop cheap. I mean, he got rid of it at a ridiculous price of $15 million. Now, the scary thing about that is there are untold amount of people in the United States right now that have $15 million. But you could come nowhere near purchasing that amount of land for $15 million anymore, which was roughly between 3 and 4 cents an acre at the time. And if someone had 3 and 4 cents an acre of land, I would probably buy it now myself because that is a fantastic deal. So 828,000 square miles later, we've doubled the size of the United States. We now own both sides of the Mississippi River, which is pretty important. And we have all of this land. Now, Congress kind of argued over that, and we can get into that kind of stuff later on. because there's some really good arguments that are made in there by the Congress and by the president about implied powers. And you'll probably study more of the implied powers types of things when you get into high school. But implied powers are things that are written into constitutions and the laws that aren't explicitly said, but they need to be able to happen in order for things to function the way that they should. And so it's a very interesting thing because obviously people interpret laws very differently. And some people might think, well, there is an implied power to do this. And other people might say, no, you don't have the power to do that, which is kind of what was going on then. Still happens today. And so they kind of went back and forth. But eventually Congress, probably seeing the green, and by green I mean money that would have been involved by allowing him to do this, because with all that expansion, lots of these guys can get even fatter pockets out of it because they're going to be able to make a little bit of money off of that as well. And so they probably said, all right, let's just go ahead and do it, although they all were a little bit worried about a war with Spain over the land eventually. And some people might even go back and argue, and there's some good arguments online, that Napoleon didn't even have the right to do what he did. Nonetheless, he did it. Jefferson sold it. So here's Jefferson, and he has all of this land. And he really is not 100% aware of what all is in that land. I mean, it's not like there were Google Maps. We didn't have satellite pictures, and there weren't travel brochures because these weren't even states yet. It was just this massive expanse of land that we knew probably had tons and tons of resources on it. So he did what any smart person would do, and you can watch this video here on your own. He decided that it needed to be explored. And so he was calling this his Voyage of Discovery. Now, it sounds like he's about to, run out there and do it, but no, he was the president. He decided he was going to hire some people to do that. And so there was a gentleman named Meriwether Lewis, obviously of Lewis and Clark. He actually was the personal secretary of Thomas Jefferson. He had been in the Army, and he actually spoke some different Native American languages. Now, like, Jefferson knew that, obviously we had pushed people out of here. We moved a little further. The French and people had pushed Native Americans even further this way. And this obviously had been controlled by the French and some of the Spanish in there, but it was mostly going to be Native Americans. So having someone that spoke fluent languages of Native Americans was a very important thing to do. Lewis had a good friend, Clark. Now, obviously, think about it. You get this amazing, amazing offer, and somebody says, pretty much you can pick your team. This is almost like, hey, I need you to work in partners in class, pick your team. You're not just going to run around and pick random people. You know what you do. You pick your best friends every time we do, hey, you pick your partners in class, because that's what normal people would do. So he had a good friend from the Army, and so he decided to get Clark to go along with him because Clark was very smart. He knew other people in the Army as well, and he knew that he would be able to help him think about all the different resources and supplies that they would need to have a successful trip. So these two guys got together and they started to prepare for their journey in the spring of 1804. And we got to really stop and kind of be in awe of what they're doing here. They're about to go explore a massive expanse of unexplored territory, and they don't know what kind of animals, plants. They don't know what the terrain is like. They don't know about what the weather is going to be like. They don't know about the different tribes of Native Americans. They have no idea what they're going to encounter, yet they had to plan and be ready for all of that. I can't imagine doing that. So they left St. Louis, Missouri by boat, traveling up the river. They went through Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota. Think about going through all these states. I've driven across the country, and it was rough. I can't imagine doing it by boat. And there's even times when they had to physically carry their boats when they got near some large waterfalls. Carrying boats. Now, I don't know how large these boats were, but I can't imagine people carrying them around through the woods. Pretty crazy. So they made it to this place called Knife River Village, and you can still look it up. It's actually still in North Dakota. It's a National Historic Site. This is a picture from Knife River Village, which may have been what it may have possibly looked like at the time. Well, at least part of it. It was here that they met a woman named Sacagawea. Sacagawea. You probably have heard of her before. You probably hear of Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea all the time. What we don't hear of very often is that it wasn't just her by herself. She was actually, for part of the trip, was with her husband, Toussaint Charbonneau. Now, you might be saying to yourself, that doesn't sound like a Native American. Sacagawea, maybe Native American. Toussaint Charbonneau sounds like those people we were talking about yesterday with long names from France, and you would be correct. He was a French explorer who was actually part of the Lewis and Clark expedition. So Sacagawea and her husband joined the expedition. They were there as interpreters to translate for the local tribes to help out Lewis and Clark. However, Charbonneau was not a very good person at all. He was actually a pretty terrible person. Everybody hated him. And later on, he was killed in the expedition. Somebody killed him because he was such a bad person. But let's get to the good person. Sacagawea, man, oh man, was she amazing. It wasn't that she just ran around interpreting, which is tough enough as it is. I think you could very well argue, very easily argue, she was the most important key piece of the entire expedition. She is the glue that held everything together. Why? Because I don't think if they didn't have her, I don't think it would have ended successfully. I don't think we would end up with the happy ending that we have at the end of these slides. Not only did she translate, okay, you got to think about it. You can only carry so many supplies, and there's no Walmarts to stop at. So you've got to be able to scavenge for food and kill animals and eat plants. Well, she knew the plants that you could eat. She knew the ones that you shouldn't eat. She knew the plants that would help you feel better when you were sick, and she knew the ones that would make you sick. She knew about all of the different animals. She helped get them horses, and probably one of the most important things, having her in the expedition as part of like the lead, often helped with hostile reactions from other tribes. Think about it. All these Europeans keep pushing you off their land, and here come some Europeans again. You're probably not going to open your arms and say, hey, welcome. You're probably going to think, you're not pushing me off my land again. The insane thing about all this, Sacagawea did this the entire time with a newborn baby. Okay, I mean, we're talking like a newborn. Right? She kept this kid with her all the time. There's some awesome pictures of her with the baby on her back, with her carrying the front. And you can think back to when we studied Native Americans about how they carried them on those boards. But I can't imagine doing that all the while doing these other things. And we're not talking about like lush conditions, okay? Like the weather was terrible, and it's not like you have fantastic food and lodging every night. You're probably sleeping by a fire outside. And I mean, it was brutal. They traveled west from North Dakota, 15 to 20 miles a day on foot, and sometimes by boat toward the mountains. Don't forget, she has a baby during all this. They were all tired. They were all freezing. They were all just absolutely done, and they didn't even have a lot of food to get there. But they actually made it to the Pacific Ocean in 1805, and that's like a year after that they left for the original expedition. That's a year, okay? That's a long time. I would imagine at this point, Jefferson and other people in Congress and other people associated are thinking, where in the world are all these people? Like, are they ever going to come back at all? But after a long winter, they made their way back, and they got there in 1806. So they dropped Sacagawea back off where she was originally from, and they made it back at about 1806. That's like 2 years. So 2 years of no phone calls, no emails, no dojo messages, no reminds. They're just gone. I can only imagine what was going on in other people's minds. Had they given up hope? Did they just understand it would probably take a while? Did they think wild animals killed them? Did they think a wild tribe of Native Americans killed them? There's probably everything going through their head. Thank goodness through Lewis and Clark, though, they mapped, well, I don't want to say all of that land, but a giant portion of that uncharted land. They mapped out new rivers, which were very important, obviously. They talked about mountains. They came back with books upon books and journal upon journal filled with details about tribes. They had science notes. They talked about plants, everything they learned from Sacagawea, animals they'd never seen before. Think about the first time you're seeing a grizzly bear. Holy cow, that had to be amazing. They came back with so many new things and stories about resources that Americans thought we have got to head out west. And so the expansion of the West started here.